I'm Iris Wilbur-Glick, Louisville Forum President, and welcome to our January meeting. We typically meet on the second Wednesday of each month at Vincenzo's restaurant in downtown Louisville, and all are welcome. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group that hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Today's program, Growing Louisville and Kentucky, a conversation about economic development for the next 4 years. Just last week, Governor Andy Beshear delivered his State of the Commonwealth address, where he highlighted how the past 4 years have been the best in Kentucky's history for new private sector investments, with $28.5 billion, with a B, billion, the highest investment figure for any governor in state history. During his first term, he and the General Assembly have fostered more than 940 private sector new location and expansion projects, creating over 50,000 jobs. So what about Louisville, Kentucky, the key economic driver for the Commonwealth? Approximately 36% of the state's population resides within 1 hour of the city, and nearly 30% of the state's GDP is generated right here. But yet there's an undertone that we must do better as a city to accelerate our economic growth compared to peer cities. And recently, the mayor just unveiled his strategic vision and plan, along with stakeholders and input from the community, called Growing Louisville Together, where I hope we can learn more about that in just a moment. So today's conversation will focus on how we all can better understand how our city and state are uniquely poised due to our geographic position, clean and abundant water sources, diversified economy with advanced manufacturing and supply chain capabilities, just to name a few of our assets. So I'm excited to bring to you today two leaders at the center of all that action. Pat Malloy joined Mayor Craig Greenberg's administration in May of last year as deputy mayor over Louisville Metro Government's Cabinet for Economic Development. After graduating Vanderbilt University Law School, Pat spent nearly 20 years practicing law, and then from 92 to 94, he served as Secretary of Finance in former Governor Barrington Jones' administration, and in 96, he became President and CEO of Atria Senior Living. He later went on to serve as CEO of senior housing provider Life Trust America before co-founding Elmcroft Senior Living in 2006. Jeff Knoll was appointed Secretary of the Cabinet for Economic Development of Kentucky in June of 2022. Secretary Knoll has a background in both public and private sectors, as well as most recently as Whirlpool Corporate Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs. Secretary Knoll was vice chairman of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation under 3 gubernatorial administrations and president of the Michigan Economic Development Foundation. He also served in the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development from 88 to 92 and worked for U.S. Senator Wendell Ford. Please join me in welcoming our panel today. So Pat, you drew the short straw. We'd like to open up with a couple of remarks, and then Secretary Knoll, Jeff, you will be up next.
Perfect. Good. Thanks, Iris. It's good to be here. Good to see some new faces. And can you all hear me fine? Should I pull this up? And good to see lots of old friends and some work colleagues. Jeff O'Brien, who's my right arm, and I describe as the Chief Operating Officer of Louisville's economic development efforts, is here today with us. So lots of good folks, and I appreciate everybody's help. Let me say at the outset, just 2 or 3 things to give you some context for the mayor's new economic development plan. Iris said, and I think I started May 10th or 11th, something like that, so I'm kind of 7-ish months in this job. The Growing Louisville Together plan, there are about 50, 60 bound copies over here. Take one, please, on your way out, and I would commend to you that you read it. It's not the Encyclopedia Britannica. It might put you to sleep, but I don't think so. I think it's well written. It's crisp, succinct. It relies on 4 pillars that I'm going to talk about in just a second that are really at the heart of this plan. It's a reflection of Mayor Greenberg's style, the way he plans, the way he works, the way he attacks issues. It is crisp. I think it's intentional. It leans in on a whole host of very specific measurable issues. And I will tell you up front, we're currently in the process of building. There will be a dashboard where you'll be able to go online. You'll be able to see all of the initiatives that are in here on the 52 pages that are the body of this document. And then you'll be able to take our temperature, measure our progress or not as he progresses in office. This is his plan, but it is not a personal plan. He is a team person. This thing, there will be 1 million. My friend Steve Miller, who worked on this thing a lot, describes it as a giant funnel into which all of these tasks have been identified across our community that are really important, but there's no way on earth that city government can effectuate all of the change that has to occur. And I can look out across this room. My friend Dave Beck, who I was just talking to, who runs the KFEC and our convention center over here, huge integral part of this plan. JCPS, huge integral part of this plan. The private sector, huge integral parts of this plan. So it's bigger. This thing is about some of the parts, and it's about creating linkages between all the groups, teams, individuals' efforts. Linkages with state government between Louisville and the state are stronger than I can ever remember in my lifetime. In the 2 years I worked for Governor Jones between 92 and 94, back then everybody talked and said the 50 miles between Louisville and Frankfort might as well have been 1,000 miles. And that was this, and I see heads nodding. That's not the same anymore. And the harsh partisanship that existed for so long, it's not quite the same anymore either. Frankly, the Republicans have steamrolled I think 3 Democrats of us that are left registered in the state. I'm being facetious with you, but it's a different spot. But there is, particularly in leadership in Frankfort, and I would ask you to stay tuned over the next several months. I think the governor is in a unique spot, and I think Senator Stivers is in a unique spot, the Speaker of the House. There is, at least at the top of the food chains in those organizations, there is a sense of bipartisanship, Nate. And it works well because also we're frankly flushed with cash right now for the first time in a long time. This state is doing well economically, so there are huge opportunities there. Let me talk quickly about sort of what you'll find in this book, and then I'll be quiet and let my friend Jeff speak to some issues. This thing, as I said, is a 52-page plan. We hired a consultant out of Indianapolis. Some of you have heard me speak before. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole on where we found this fellow. It's a guy named Larry Gigerich, who is he's a thought leader in economic development, and particularly how cities do economic development, how municipalities. He ended up working for a guy named Stephen Goldsmith, who now runs the Mayor's School at the Harvard Kennedy School, and he also is a thought leader. And Larry has built a huge economic development consulting, sort of fresh thoughts, fresh ideas, business out over the last 30, 40 years. He came to Louisville. In the back of this book, you'll read, he's got about a 15-page SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I would commend to you that will give you some good insights. 3 or 4 points I'll leave with you on that. When I first talked to him back in June, I guess I reached out to him. I said, tell me about Louisville. And he's the chairman of the Site Selectors Guild, which, by the way, is the largest site relocation organization in the world. And he's their chair right now. And he said, well, I got good news and bad news. He said, the bad news is you don't have a brand. He said, the good news is you don't have a brand. So what do you mean by that? He said, you are positioned in the heart of middle America between this hot city to the south, Nashville, that we all get tired of talking about. Indianapolis has had its share of growth, Columbus, Ohio. You're centered right here in the middle of America. And he said, Louisville is kind of an afterthought. It's a flyover city in many instances for a lot of people looking at it because we really haven't created a brand. And we'll speak more to that in the conversation as we go forward with this. So he said, that's the interesting thing. He said, Louisville has this, and he told me when we finished the work, he said, you've got a 2-year window. Nashville's overbuilt right now. Structurally, it's overbuilt its infrastructure. There's no such thing as a starter home in that town. You can't, Debbie, you couldn't send a child or a grandchild down there to try to buy a $200,000 home if they had a good starter job, which or 175. The market has outstripped all of that. Indianapolis has got a lot of the same issues. So Louisville, for whatever warts or issues we've got, is in this really unique spot to grow and to build a brand. The other thing we've had for a decade, de minimis population growth, basically flat, 6% over 10 years, which is less than a point a year. We're actually 0.2% down in the 25 to 40-year-old cohort. Well, you're actually younger than my kids, but that generation right below the 40-year-olds, that is actually dipped down a smidge. It's not bad down drastically, but it's dropped a smidge. So population growth that's an issue that we've got to attack. The good news is we don't have a tail that wags the dog in this town. We have 10 industries that make up more than 5% of the local economy. That's huge. So if healthcare hits the skids, Ford Motor's still making cars and trucks, and General Electric is still making the largest dishwasher facility in the world. So we've got good diversity. Access to capital is a huge issue, and it's access to capital, I think, as a naive East End business guy, I don't think I had a full appreciation of this. It's not just access to capital for people that have had doors open for them all their lives, like I've had. It's all the people that have, for reasons of gender or color or structural poverty, don't have any way to access capital. But I'll give you one statistic. AMPed, if you follow Dave Christopher at AMPed, which is a heck of an organization in this town, that is building a mentorship and incubation program for African-American businesses. They just graduated 30 African-American businesses in his program last month. He's got 500 minority businesses on the wait list. That's people that need 500, that need mentoring, that need access to that, not $1 million worth of capital, but they need a $25,000 loan, or they need a guarantee for that first $2 million on a development deal that isn't going to get done unless somebody steps up and guarantees that lead piece of capital for them. So those are the four things in the study that you'll see. And then, as I've talked enough, there are four pillars that drive this economic plan. Quality of place. We got to sell what we have physically in this town. It's a bit of a daydream to think that magically we're going to get a Fortune 100 company that's going to roll over and fill the Aegon Tower is full, but fill the Brown Williamson Tower or the Fifth Third Tower. And we talk more about that later. Education and skills. This is everything from JCPS to the academies to University of Louisville's ranked one position, becoming a world-class university, access to capital, which I've talked about, and telling our story. The mayor talks about this a lot, about building a brand, and I'll talk more about that as we get into the conversation. But those are the four legs of the economic development plan. So I would commend all that to your bedtime reading stack. Jeff, I'll hush and let you talk.
No, sir, I'd rather listen to you all day long. And obviously, I can't read the fine print because when I got invited to this event, I didn't realize I'd be sitting here while you all are eating Vincenzo's food, and I'm sitting up here doing the work with him. I feel like a gladiator in some respects. You know, poor Jeff heard something I said on Monday, and it just struck me Sunday when I was preparing that it would work for today's presentation. Warren Buffett once made a comment, if you're sitting in the shade, just remember, the work or actions of somebody else planted that tree. This governor and the successes that have been talked about already are amazing. And everything begins with leadership. Leadership, strategy, structure, and process. My boss, the chairman of Whirlpool, beat that into my head for a lot of years. And this governor deserves all of the credit. But he's the kind of person who acknowledges the shade in which we sit to reflect upon those opportunities. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but I want to talk about where do we go from here. And you know, when you think about where we want to go from here, it's good to sit in that shade and ponder, but to also acknowledge all the things that have been done to get us here. And I'm not one to criticize others or think this isn't good, because I really believe everybody before us has tried to build a better way of life for all these young people in this room. But you got to acknowledge what's happening around you. Straight talk, straight understanding. Hey, this world is in the most tumultuous kind of situation than ever. And so our strategies around economic development need to reflect that. The technology changes are happening so fast and so quickly, I could talk about that all day long. Labor force dynamics are changing everything, whether we like it or not. I think I read in Wall Street this week, 1.4 job opening for everybody in the marketplace looking for a job. It's going to change the world. Supply chain. Look, when I was at Whirlpool competing against that company known as Higher GE, supply chain changed during COVID. It's going to continue to change. Low carbon transitions, it's just the fact of life. Federal funding, whether you like it or not, is an all-time high relative to what's happening in business and in the world. And we are in an unbelievable situation from just global tensions. That's the environment. So how do we win in that environment? How do we position Kentucky to do that? We've worked with McKinsey. We've worked with Pat, who, by the way, we met together for coffee quite a few months ago, and we've been on the calls and phones and meetings together between he and Jeff. You all have got a great leadership team. And when I worked at the Brown and Williamson Corporation in that tower 110 years ago, I fell in love with this community. So let's talk about what do we really need to do. And I want to base this on everything that we're going to talk about is based on data. You know, what's that location quotient for the kinds of industries that have highest potential opportunities in Kentucky, that have the greatest multiplier impact, that have the highest percentage of growth, they're at the scale that make a difference? Really using data leads you to make good decisions. So the following. We have got to be and continue to be the leader in the automotive revolution because it's happening. Our state is already leading in it, but we better continue to do that because that whole industry is going to change, and we'll talk about that, I know, later today. We have got to be known as a state leader in the manufacturing renaissance. We already are. I think it's about 12.9% of all the jobs in Kentucky are tied to manufacturing based on 8.1% of the national average. So we've got to be winning in that space without a doubt. I think we have to capture more than our fair share of all of the tomorrow's jobs. Business services, professional services, finance. It also happens to be the greatest segment of growth in our country, projected at 1.7 million jobs over the near future. The fourth thing is we have really got to embrace our natural assets. Just drive around and look at the beauty of Kentucky and realize where we are on a map. I didn't do good in geography, but I can look at the map and know we are great compared to all the other states. So that means really working like UPS did here on logistics that brings value add that they did in the medical servicing side of things. And folks, let's also not overlook the impact of tourism. Tourism can create jobs, tourism can create quality of life, and tourism is a great pathway employment for other opportunities. So those are the 5 areas we think we need to focus on in terms of moving Kentucky forward. Now, how do you do that? And how do you make it simple so that we can all work together to realize those benefits? All right, it's what we did at Whirlpool. It's pretty simple. It's what they do at Haier and GE. You've got to offer the best products, the best value, with the best service to get things done. And folks, I don't care what it takes, but opportunities only come from people sharing in the responsibilities to achieve them. Workforce and education are not something we can sit on the sidelines any longer. Economic developers, business leaders, we all have to jump in with both feet, celebrate the successes like are in this room today, but have straight talk and honesty about where we've got to do better. This is where the driver for Kentucky really needs to be in terms of bringing about great change and opportunities. Another area, embrace entrepreneurialism and innovation. That's a really critical factor because we need to catalyze the ecosystems that are here, but help streamline them so they work more, I think, seamlessly. And at the end of the day, let's be proud and let's stake out a claim. We will be the state known for, let's ideate, make it, and be launch ready. If we can do that in that whole space, think about winning and what it really means for us. And also think about as government making investments in infrastructure. Let's not do it transactionally or thinking about it as a locational area on a map. This needs to be integrated with strategies so infrastructure improvements really yield the benefits you're looking for. And we have to do that working collaboratively without a doubt. The old term placemaking, but I view that a little different. There's economic factors that determine quality of life, education, health factors. We have really, as a state and all of us together, have got to work on those drivers in terms of making that one of the 5 enablers to achieve the 5 areas of focus that we're working on. And last but not least, one size does not fit all. Legislature is great. I've preached a little bit to them. You can't have just one piece of legislation or one incentive package. We need a strategy that fits Western Kentucky, fits Eastern Kentucky, fits Louisville, fits all the other areas across the state because we have such great diversity. I like to call it, we have 120 profound but yet interdependent and interconnected but separate and distinct counties. Celebrate that. Let's make it all work. It fits with Louisville's strategic efforts. Quality of place, investing in people, telling the story. So that's what we need to do. But let me take a step back as you kick this off. Kentucky's winning. So let's sit under that shade tree and ponder our future. But then let's step up and realize we have to work together like never before. We have to step up under that shade and acknowledge all the people that got us here. And then we got to move forward in some way that I don't think we always have in the past. We need to have that conviction to win. We need to embrace that spirit of winning with integrity. Kentucky's earned it. Louisville's earned it. And if you focus on those key areas that I mentioned, and if you have the straight talk, and if you work together, that spirit of winning comes through. And we've got really in this room the reasons to do it, these young folks sitting at these tables.
Thank you both. A reminder, if you have questions for our panelists, please fill out the question slips at your table, wave them up, and then a board member will come by. So you both sort of touched on this. What can Louisville and Kentucky do to be best positioned for the economy of the future, right? So it's not good enough that we're competitive today. We really need to anticipate the disruptions in technology, for instance, that are coming tomorrow. So what are some specifics that we're doing at the local and state levels to better prepare, better position Kentucky?
Oh, there's a whole host of things, strategic things. We're completely rethinking how we do housing and land development here in Louisville, and that's a huge issue. There's an article in Axios today the mayor sent me about an hour ago, and I had seen some of the preliminary work on this. Take a look at what's going on in Minneapolis. Minneapolis has actually flattened the curve on, you don't flatten it all the way out on the rate of inflation on housing costs, but they have lowered it beneath the rate of inflation up there. Why? Because they rethought the development code. This city covered itself with R4 zoning when I was a kid, or probably before I was a kid, and which means everything in this town kind of by default is single family housing. And you've got this, everybody acknowledges the need for affordable housing. Not everybody kind of wants it in their own neighborhood. But and there's also another article in today's Wall Street Journal, Miami and Bal Harbor. If you've been to Bal Harbor, it might be the most expensive place in Miami. Through a state statute down there, the Democrats pushed, DeSantis signed, is an affordable housing incentive that's going to put workplace development in the heart of Bal Harbor. Places so that people that work in the hotels, that work in all of those retail shops there, have got a place to live that's affordable right in that neighborhood. Well, we've got antiquated zoning laws in this town. This is just one example of the kind of rethinking that we've got to do. We need to have what they call middle housing, duplexes, triplexes. We need affordable housing. We need to talk to our friends at council. This will be part of a political process conversation the mayor's going to have over the next year, that you got to stop voting en masse to kill affordable housing in various pockets of this neighborhood. We need affordable housing. I need it we need it in Prospect, we need it in the East End, and we need it on Cane Run Road, and we need it in Valley Station, because the housing needs assessments, which hadn't been made public yet, shows that we've started 3,500 units in the last 12 months of affordable housing in this town. They're not all under construction. The mayor declared in his 4 years he'd like to get 15,000 built. The need is 30,000. We got 30,000 units of affordable housing that don't exist in this town. And that, in the rate of inflation, what was a $700 a month studio apartment for a working woman 8 years ago, before the world ended with COVID, is today $1,700 a month. Wages have gone up, but they haven't gone up on that percentage basis. So working people are getting hurt. And so we gotta, and you can't attract people to build all the stuff that Jeff and everybody else are trying to build in this state unless you've got a population that's going to work in it. So that's just one. The whole land development code it sounds tedious. Your brain defaults to planning and zoning lawyers and all this weird arcane stuff, but it's pretty basic. We need to be thinking about how to fill in infill sites all over this community. Sure, we've got to preserve the Floyd's Fork, and there's certain environmental waterways and all of that stuff that have to be preserved. So it's got to be done with the lens of sustainability, but we've got to rethink how we build housing and make Louisville a place where people want to live and work if we're going to build an advanced manufacturing facility. Excuse me. That's just one example.
I like it when Pat and I are always in agreement. And that's how Kentucky's going to grow. Kentucky needs Louisville, Louisville needs Kentucky, and we need to focus in on these things. And I'm not going to talk about all the initiatives the governor has, because that's not why I'm here. But I really do believe his focus on education, raising salaries for teachers, really investing in business education partnerships, putting real money out there into those technical education centers across the state, and plowing money into infrastructure like the Spence Abraham Bridge, the Companion Bridge being built, finishing up the Mountain Parkway, what's happening down on the border of Indiana and around Evansville. Those are the kind of things that are opening up opportunities. But I'll go back and reinforce what we talk about in terms of we really need to make sure the blocking and tackling of what creates opportunities for all Kentuckians and not but a few matters. You know, when I was at Whirlpool, we did some things with Habitat. We formed a not-for-profit. We did a 400-unit Hope 6 housing development. We did a master plan redevelopment with a golf course and low-end, mid-end, high-end housing. We also did a residential neighborhood where if you're in that neighborhood, there were houses where we gave money to Habitat to change kind of the porch area and the garage areas to make the homes feel different. And if I take you to that neighborhood now, there were affordable homes supported by government to make them affordable. And yet today there's also houses that are still affordable and some that go $500,000-$600,000. Mixed development, planned development, smart development really works, and that's what we've got to do. Educate, provide training, provide the right kind of quality of life, focus on the zoning areas. Be also mindful of the aesthetics and pleasing things that go with being smart about doing those kinds of developments. And then stay true to the best opportunity to bring about change for anybody is a great job. And I think that's one of the reasons we have to continue leading the automotive sector. You know, I think healthcare is the number one industry in Louisville. Pays average wages somewhere in the park of $68,000. Yep. That's fantastic. You know, this governor and our team over the past year have incentivized jobs across the entire spectrum, across the entire state that are approaching $56,000 a year before benefits. That's the things you have to focus on. So that's why when you read about tools to create land and products so that you can really bring about industrial opportunities, we need more industrial land in this area to create and to bring that advanced manufacturing. Everybody wants AI. Biggest change in AI is going to be in manufacturing, folks. How do we grab that? How do we take advantage of that? So I could go ad nauseum on things that I think that we need to do. I'll just give you that one last little viewpoint in my humble opinion. Collaboration, working together, build real key focus areas like Pat and the team have done for Louisville and like we are doing for Kentucky, 4 here, 5 there, but bring them together and get up every day thinking about these young folks and what do we need to do to make their life better. You do that and you do the things we talked about, change will come about.
Can I give you an example of one more tool?
Sure.
Talked about land development code. You know, the first week I was on the job, 100 phone calls. You got to get the homeless people off the street, and you got to get the office towers in downtown Louisville filled. Okay, well, I'd like to be taller and have more hair, but
I called you on one of those, I think.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't. I'm just teasing.
Those are hard, intractable issues, but they are solvable problems. There are conversations going on right now that downtown Louisville is actually it's a point or two higher than cities its size across the country. It's about 76% occupied in the central business district. And 2 of the main buildings, I call it National City, sorry, the PNC building over here and Aegon are full. And but we've got a whole bunch of buildings that are structurally, they're not going to be full of offices in my lifetime. Kentucky Home Life Building, Hayburn Building, Starks Building, 310 West Liberty Building. I can name 4 or 5 more. So what do you do with those? Well, there's some models around the country. Google Calgary, Canada, when you go home today. Calgary got killed with the tar sands or whatever the big oil thing they had up there. That market goes away, and they had 10 office towers in Calgary that are now empty, except they're not anymore because the Canadian government, that's smaller and it's a little more nimble economically than the United States is, but they passed made a financial commitment and passed a huge bond offering, and they've converted 10 office towers in downtown Calgary to residential, and people are living in them. That's the answer to downtown Louisville. It's not the only answer. This whole quality of place conversation, the mayor has talked publicly about a reimagining of the Belvedere. Follow that work. It's really important work. Firm out of London that did the Little Island on the Hudson River on the west side of Manhattan. It's been engaged because that's a desert up there. Come out of, next time you're at the Center for the Arts, go out the back door, and it's just concrete. And it's been that way for a decade. And there's no connection between the Galt House, that empty space, doesn't connect to the Ali Museum, and then you've got that museum plaza space that's been sitting over there empty for 25 years. Well, there's going to be a reimagining of that space. We're doing the same thing. We haven't announced the name of the group yet, but there's an internationally known group that's coming to Louisville that's going to help us plan and reimagine 4th Street at the Galt House all the way through to 4th Street Live right in across Dave Beck's porch there at the Kentucky Convention Center. That's real work where we're going to need real money out of Frankfurt. And on the office to residential conversion thing, we reached out to Stivers about a plan, the mayor did, to give us $30 million on that plan. They came back with, heck, let's do this statewide. And Louisville will get its lion's share because we're 30-40% of the state's economy. So I think you're going to see some real action because you can't convert these buildings without government money. Doesn't work. You just can't get the economics to work. Interest rates are too high, construction costs too high. But if you start reimagining the Kentucky Home Life building as a hotel, or people living in the Habron building up at 3rd and Broadway, or new housing getting built by LDG at 4th and Broadway, the old Brown Brothers site, then all of a sudden you'll solve the south or the north of Broadway problem, and 4th Street will fill in. So so you got to think with specificity. And one thing I would say to all of you all, because you all are leaders in this room as I look out over the crowd, lean in on this stuff and talk to people in Frankfurt. Let your voices be heard. I don't mean send 10 emails, but if you know Stivers or you know Speaker Osborne or you know people who know them or you know folks at GLI, my friend Clark Welch is sitting over there, let your voice be heard on this stuff because it matters, because we really do have an interesting opportunity right now. I think the next year or two, I think you're going to see Louisville take its place among the great American cities. I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't believe in that and believe in this town. And I think they've done heroic work lifting this state up. I mean, it's if you think about where Governor Beshear was politically when he went in, well, that divide, I mean, there's still R's and D's, and you're not going to get over all that stuff. But it's a civilized discourse that occurs today, and it's smart, professional, thoughtful people, not everywhere, but in leadership on both sides of the aisle. But that's great. It means we're not trying to claw each other's eyes out in this state. So, and Louisville needs the state to succeed.
So on that note, you both reference collaboration. You both reference, instances where we need the cooperation, need the support from your respective legislative bodies. And Pat, in your case, you may need Frankfurt help. So what can you each share with us, sort of the strategy, again, what you can share regarding building more support within the legislative process? Again, a lot of the positive and encouraging initiatives you listed can't be done alone, that we will need legislative approval, whether it's at the local or state level. So how do we get that done? What are the plans to foster more support?
I'll give you just a couple of real quick ones. First of all, I've spent my whole life either on the private side or public side engaged in government, and I think sometimes we make it too complicated. People are people, and if you give them the results of things that you've already done and you've shown that those dollars have been used in great ways and you've seen the benefits that come from it, that's step one. I think secondly, and just as importantly, you don't go in and ever ask for anything. You go in and say, here's what we're doing. Here's what we've got to get done. Here's what our plans are. And here's everybody that's working together to make it happen. Now, here's what we need from you to pull it all together. And I think if you think about those things, every legislative member that I've met with becomes very realistic. And so I think in answer to your question, Pat and the team and Jeff and the mayor have done a fabulous job, as has Governor Beshear. Let's get the right plans. Let's get the right strategies. Let's pull people together. But every time we do something, let's show the benefits that come from it. Now, I've got a tiny staff. It's far less than what it was when I worked there 100 years ago. But about a third of our staff is totally dedicated to compliance. We had over 1,000 compliance checks on the incentives that we get last year alone. And let me tell you, I believe compliance matters. I'm proud of it, because when I can go in and see a legislator and say, now here's the money you provided, here's the tax incentive, and here's the fact that we're, number 5 in the country relative to new job announcements. That's the return on your investment. Now let's talk about something else that we need to do. That's why I think it's so important. That's why I think that you all reach out to these folks. And that's why I just give Pat and the team a lot of credit, as is the governor. Don't try to be all things to all people initially. Create a plan that says, let's get this, this, and this done. And then we can go get this, this, and that done. And along the way, we'll be embracing everyone, and everyone will be given that opportunity.
I agree with all of that. And I think some of it's just changing the conversation and the nature of the discourse. Jason Nemus, who's the ranking Republican in Jefferson County, he and I probably on 40, 50% of the issues don't agree on stuff. And he ran this House Bill 314 commission that came in here with trying to take a hard look at how we do metro government and how we allocate tax dollars in this state. And there was some headbutting that went on in that process. But the mayor and Representative Nemes, they've got a very civil conversation and meet routinely on what's good for Jefferson County. His big passion is making sure that the folks outside the watershed get their fair share of the pie, and that's okay. I mean, we may agree or disagree on particular issues there, but the discourse is civilized, and the same thing with Stivers. And I also think I think of two examples that have come to mind about people that have helped close that divide. There's a woman named Jennifer Hancock, who many of you know, runs Volunteers of America. She's active in running all sorts of public service, health service communities here and around Louisville and out in the state. And as much as any CEO of any not-for-profit that I know of in the state, she has built meaningful bridges out there. She built a facility for mothers who are addicted with drugs, delivering babies in Manchester, Kentucky, right in the heart of the opioid area. And I've been there, I've toured it, and it's about 4 blocks from Bob Stivers' law office. And that is not a partisan conversation. That's a human service, help your neighbor conversation. And she has built those kind of relationships out in the state, which closes that divide that has existed in this state for so long. Another one that a lot of you probably know in this room, and I didn't know the full extent of it, Teddy Abrams took the Louisville Orchestra 2 or 3 months ago, and they did a concert on top of a former strip mine in Beattyville, Kentucky. And people from counties all over were there to watch the Louisville Orchestra, which is the best funded, best orchestra outside of a major city in America, just nominated for a Grammy Award. You talk about a brand around which we can build a bunch of stuff. So there are all of these examples, and Teddy's a musician and a composer, and Graham Parker is a guy from England who lives in New York half the time and runs the business side of the orchestra. But they get the need to build bridges in this state and to close the gap and to build a community around these assets. So those are just a couple of examples of the kind of work that's going on.
You know, Stellar Snacks is a great example of jobs that the governor helped bring and create in the West End Opportunity Zone area, but there's behind-the-scenes issues relative to how do you help support a company like that, how do you make the tools there. And candidly, it was the kinds of flexibility and creativity that was supported by the legislator, supported by the governor, that allowed us to bring in a young lady who's got a great business model, and going to create several hundred jobs in an area in which our city needs it the most. That was done because from local government, the local neighborhoods, legislative members, and the governor, they worked together on a common vision of what needed to be done. Yeah, it sounds simpler than it really is, but I do go back to create those relationships, show the value and benefit that comes from them, celebrating them together, but always realize, first put forth what it is you're doing, first put forth what skin we're putting into the game, then make the ask of the state legislature. And that's how you create real true collaboration and real cooperation, especially as you always keep that North Star. What are we trying to accomplish with this transaction or with this activity? Just like the downtown, we really have a vision because that'll help everyone across the state, and it'll help all different kinds of folks from different spectrums. That's the key to collaboration.
We'll move to some audience questions. Elizabeth, do you have one for us?
One deterrent for people moving downtown Louisville would be the lack of retail, particularly grocery. Are there any plans to try to encourage a grocery store to move downtown?
Yeah, yes, there are. And it's who was I in a conversation with? Rebecca, I guess you and I were maybe in the last hour, somebody. And it's a tough chicken and egg thing. There was $3 million allocated in the last city budget. A couple of not-for-profits tried to get something started. That has not come to fruition. I've spent time, Jeff and I have spent time, we've talked with Brandon, I know you do a bunch of work with Kroger. We've talked to the folks at Kroger. I've talked to Jake Cannon, the new guy running Kroger. I've talked to the guys. You know, IGA is headquartered in Bowling Green, Kentucky, one of the largest grocers in the country. We've talked to Franklin Jelsma hooked me up with their CEO. I'm blank on the fellow's name. We talked to those people. Trader Joe's is in some conversations locally here right now. They're hard economic issues. They're not, I don't think they're labor issues. It's just economics. You know, grocery stores are these big balls of cash that come through and the margin's about this thin. It's a hard business to make any money in. You have to have volume and people. So that's at the heart of it. But we're on it, and we're going to go back Jeff and I were talking this week, the $3 million that we've got in this budget that probably won't get spent in this fiscal year, we're going to ask the council, maybe to up that dollars to a larger cash incentive as we roll into fiscal year 25. And so we're focused on it. But you've got to separate the dreams from the reality. I mean, and some people have tried, there's some bodegas that have been tried to be built around town. There's a lot of fresh markets, but we need, downtown Louisville and the most needed place is the West End. We need some sizable big box grocery stores.
First, get plans to put in people living in the area. Show those plans are progressing. You'll get the grocers'
You'll get the
attention.
grocery.
Bring the healthcare facility providers, because you already have. Try to create a new, unique partnership, especially in the downtown or West End area, where maybe the healthcare providers are part of that to bring good, fresh food and some services into that building. It is a very difficult task, but it goes back to the blocking and tackling, and every time you have a success, frame it, shape it, and communicate it to the grocer operators to show this is the progress we're making. Don't miss out on the window of opportunity. And I believe that's really why you've got a plan that you have here, is to have those things be, if you will, building blocks that build on one block at a time to bring about that kind of success.
And let me add there, to Jeff's point, and East End kid, I come into this job, I've spent half my afternoons and weekends driving to places. I know this city pretty darn well. I grew up working all over this town, but I can't tell you in my adult life I've spent as much time in the west side of Louisville as I need to. But if you haven't gone and if you haven't looked at what Norton's is doing at 28th Street, if you haven't looked at the Goodwill Opportunity Zone, if you haven't figured out what's going, if you go to 11th and Algonquin, go down 9th or 7th and go under the viaduct there on the other side, 3 blocks over from Central Park and 610 Magnolia, go to the other side. Parkway Village, the poorest public housing project, is on the left-hand side there in the city, owned by Louisville Metropolitan Housing. But then there is a 6-7 acre site that we've just finished up the remediation, brownfield site, city, your tax dollars, $10 million, to clean that site up, and they're getting ready to construct 220 affordable and a few market rate housing in that, the first new housing of any consequence in the West End in a long, long time. And those places are going to have the ripple effect of getting people to live there again and businesses to thrive and groceries to open. So that's a long-winded answer to a multi-sided hard problem. So,
Tom?
Thank you. This is for both of the panelists, and it kind of follows up on something you were addressing earlier. C and D rated hospitals discourage companies to move to Louisville. What can be done to cajole the hospital leadership to improve?
you lost me on the
The
question.
hospital leadership to improve, I'm sorry. What can be done to get the, I guess
Oh,
the
you're
grades
talking about
up?
the leapfrog ratings.
Yeah.
That rating system. Well, I'm not
I'm
a
assuming
subject
yes.
matter expert, although I am vice chairman of the University of Louisville Hospital System. I should be. I should be. First of all, well, I'll just speak. Norton and Baptist have pretty darn good they all 3 systems. This is a 3-system town. And Norton and Baptist didn't have the structural economic issues that, and it's broader than the University of Louisville. I'm not going to go all the way down this rabbit hole, but they have maintained pretty high grades in that leapfrog system. The University of Louisville's have moved ahead markedly, but just remember, Dr. Bendapudi, I think, had the vision and guts to do that deal with leadership. Tom Miller's the CEO of that organization. She brought him up here out of Nashville, and they've rebuilt a completely new hospital system around Fraser Rehab, Jewish Hospital. Several of those were borderline insolvent. Marion Elizabeth has a brand new birthing center for the first time in Louisville's history. In 50 years, a woman can deliver a baby west of I-65. They've been able to do that forever in this town. Peace, which is the largest behavioral hospital in the city, and on and on. They built a heck of a system there. So, you're right, but they're being very intentional about it. Jason Miller's chief medical officer over there. He is expert in this area, and they're all over this issue. But you're right. And Dr. Schatzel, I will share this. We are in the middle of a new strategic plan because her words, where I'm very respectful of what Dr. Capilouto's done in Lexington. I don't want to just compete with the Markey and the Chandler system in Lexington. I want Louisville to compete with Hopkins and Cleveland Clinic and Mayo Clinic. And we are of a city, University of Pittsburgh, premier liver center in the country. So that's the way we need to be thinking, and they're thinking that way, I promise you, at the University of Louisville and at the University of Louisville Health System. So,
Elizabeth?
Education and healthcare are the basic building blocks for a community and for a state. This questioner cites a statistic that literacy in Kentucky is at 78%. What plans are present to overcome that challenge?
First of all, I think the governor's vision of universal pre-K makes a lot of sense. I know there's a lot of different views on it, but I'm just going to give a personal anecdote. All I know is that my wife and I both worked when we moved to Michigan, and we both made sure that when our son was, I think, about the age of 2 or 3, we found some what I call stimulating phases and opportunities for daycare that then led into pre-kindergarten. And my son's done a great thing, and while I don't wish my 3-year-old on anybody when he was 3 because he was very active, I think we have to understand real performance in education begins at the earliest age possible. And if universal pre-K is not the answer, what is it that we're doing to make sure that the working families in this state, in this community, know with confidence that their children, when they're being cared for, are not just being watched and taken care of to make sure they don't fall down the steps or skin a knee, but they are actually getting the stimuli they need to be inquisitive, to be interested. And those are things that, again, sound easy, take a lot of work, but I really do believe that that's the area where, and I think that's the commitment for, that needs to be done in order to make things happen. And I'm going to go back to something Pat said. It's not about us. It's not about the governor. It's not about the legislature. This is about the residents of Kentucky coming together and being crystal clear on what we say is important. And it's okay that there's disagreement. There's okay that there's head knocking. But at the end of the day, our voices have to be heard, and we have to step into the ring and articulate what we believe needs to be done. Because that is the only way that it gets done, is true collaboration and really forming a way in which we all work together. Again, I think disagreement is great. I had an aunt with 16 kids, another with 12. Trust me, in families, we had disagreements. Disagreements are the best form of finding a common ground to work together.
I'll just echo on what Jeff said, that universal pre-K it's at the heart of, and I'm talking about 3 and 4-year-olds. Watch the work of Mariana Barzan, who's doing this work, leading a task force for the mayor right now. We've asked the legislature for pilot funding. We're not naive enough to believe they're going to fully fund this right now. It would be a huge leap off the cliff, but it is vital, and it's the only way out of poverty for parts of our community that are structurally impaired. 13.7% of the families in Jefferson County live below the poverty line. In the 9 West End neighborhoods, it's 37%.
And I think you got to.
It's the only way out.
I completely agree. You got to link the equation a wee bit. We're creating great jobs. We've got jobs that, in manufacturing, that you wear a white coat and use a laptop. That's pretty cool. But if I'm a single mom or a single dad, and you got 2 or 3, 4, 5-year-old kids, how do you know that they're being taken care of? And so I actually believe the equation around either pre-K, universal pre-K, daycare support, what's the role of the business community to make all of this work? It is truly a process by which we all have to come together, because it's okay to have a great job, but you got to know that your family's being taken care of. It's great to know that your young person, your child, is going to get educated in the right way, but if it comes at the expense of your being able to do what you want to do in terms of employment, the balance is out of kilter. That's why I think all these things have to be done in a kind of a cohesive, coordinated way.
Thank you. The next question is, what is being done to encourage and support tech startups? And that's for either one or both of you.
First of all, I go back to the shade tree. Let's kind of celebrate some of the things that are out there and some of the things that I think are happening. I think we have some $370 million out of our Office of Kentucky and Innovation just in the city of Louisville that have received private capital for the work they've done and the kind of support we have offered to them. We have tools, everything from small business tax credits, venture fund or angel fund investor tax credits, funding that goes directly in, partnerships with universities. And there's results and there's examples of what's really been done. But I think we got to step it up a little bit, and we got to first look at the ecosystem in which technology, job creation, support for small business, and those sorts of things occurs, because I get a little confused when I hear about all the different entities that are involved in this space. What you need is a real seamless way in which people can go in when they've got a great idea, know where to get that support, know where to go find some of that funding that's going to help them get launched, and not have to be a revolving door where you figure out where you get off on it. The other is give us a little break here from time to time. I believe in straight talk. It's shared responsibility. When folks who come in that have an idea, don't have a business plan, or haven't even thought about where they need to go knock on a door, I don't think we should be spending time with them. We should help them, guide them, but that's not where we should be putting our energy. So I think that's the case. I do believe there needs to be more what I call risk funding available for things to be done in this state. But I don't think it has to be large, but it needs to be deployed in a very smart, focused way. And you put your prioritization in those areas or those ideas like life sciences, agritech, and some of the others, where the data tells us there's greater opportunities and there's greater ecosystems in the state to support and launch those kinds of opportunities. But we need to do more of it for sure.
So we're going to do a lightning round in order to get to more questions. And so I'll start off with one here, and then that'll give our questioner some time to consolidate some questions. So last month, we had members of the General Assembly come and essentially do a legislative preview. One of the main issues that they harped on was reducing the personal income tax, so keeping state spending tight in order to achieve the further reduction of the personal income tax. Thoughts on Kentucky's tax code, and is that part of the equation for economic development?
I'll speak quickly to it. I think we're on a trajectory of where we need to be. There's some other work. Need to be careful of this. I'll take my Mayor Greenberg hat off for a second. This is which is hard to do. I think the income tax will settle out at 3%. That's my gut. There's work to be done in the sales tax arena. I'm not talking about driving the 6% up, although Indiana has a 7% sales tax. I am talking about local option, local tools, follow the work that Lena Muldoon's doing on that. That's hard, heavy lifting because it requires a constitutional amendment. There are a bunch of exemptions in the sales tax code that probably should be closed, and we still have a structural problem in this state that goes back, Mike, to House Bill 44 when you and I were kids. We've got this structural cap on property taxes. Your $3,000 property tax here would be $12,000 in Nashville. We are way undervalued, not underassessed, but the value rate just runs into an artificial cap that goes back to something silly the state legislature did 35, 40 years ago. So, I mean, I think that's part of the equation. Although Kentucky, I don't know that you're more expert than this than me, but we don't get beat up on that topic like we did 10 or 15 years ago. I think we're pretty competitive.
No, and my years in the private sector working for a chairman, if I were to answer the question, hey, we need to make sure we're over here in this state or this location that's got this tax rate. He was one of the smartest people I've ever worked with, and he would lean back and say, I don't care. What I really want to know is what's the value? What's the operational benefits we get from locating there? What's the kind of folks and the talent that we can draw from? And then I want to know what's my fair share of taxes to pay, because what I really want to do is know where is the best value, best cost, best service location to take a company. And so while I sometimes think it's great because you need, in order to effectuate change, you need laser focus to kind of drive through to get toward whatever that goal might be in terms of lowering the tax rate. But I come back on the other side of the equation and say, let's also not lose sight of, let's make sure we keep the right value. Let's make sure we keep the right services that are out there. And let's also ultimately always strive towards that right balance. And I truly believe Kentucky's not only heading in that right direction, and I say that by moving back to this area, and I'm not going to give one Democrat or anybody else full credit for it. I'm going to say we're living in an environment where this state is moving in the right direction. We're winning, and I think the focus on best cost, best value, the right tax rate, and the right services, what we need to continue to be doing. And I think the debate, the head knocking, and the conversations around this topic is what is critically important. And no, we don't hear from companies that we're working with that somehow or another they aren't coming here because of the tax rate. But let's keep in mind, in fairness, the real focus has been primarily, I think, on lowering the individual tax rate, and that is an important component of attracting and retaining talent. But again, best cost, best value is the real objective here.
Yep.
Elizabeth, quick one.
Which 2 or 3 other American cities do you think offer the best or aspirational economic and brand model for Louisville?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, Swattsdale, Austin 10 years ago, Nashville 10 years ago. one thing, I was educated and lived in Nashville, and I ran a company down there for 5 years. One thing, and this is where University of Louisville is critical, there's a critical mass of intellectual capital and private equity capital in Nashville that's really has been spun off healthcare company on top of healthcare company, and the great incubator that Vanderbilt is down there. And it was only Vanderbilt when I was there, but today it's Vanderbilt, it's Belmont, Lipscomb, Fisk, Meharry. We've got a nascent asset here in Dr. Cosby Simmons, which is now an HBCU, one of a limited number in the country. Those are destination locations. Fisk and Meharry and other cities have shown the path on that. So I looked at assets in other cities. I really don't. The mayor would say if he were here, I want Louisville to be Louisville, and he uses the word authentic a lot. We're not a kitschy town. We are not a gimmicky town. I don't want this place to be Vegas on wheels with a bunch of crazies driving down Market Street, although a few crazies helps a little bit, helps tourism and all that stuff. But you get my point. But there is an authenticity about quality of life in this place, this river town, that we're going to really explore in this branding thing. And there's so many assets that we don't talk about here. We've got a 1,000-acre forest in this city. I think it's the largest inland forest in America, the Jefferson Memorial Forest. And if 10 of you have hiked through it in this room, I'll buy you a steak dinner. And I'm not judging anybody, but it's in Fairdale. And Fairdale is a lovely spot. But if you live on the east side, you don't go out there that much. Dan Syme wants you to come out there, and he's right. But that's just one example of the jewels we've got. My friend Riggs Lewis, there's a fabulous museum at Fort Knox that, again, I'll bet 5 people in this city haven't been to, unless it was Johnny Yarmouth and me on a school bus trip when we were kids. But we don't think about linkages with Meade County and Fort Knox in this town. University of Louisville's beginning to do that. So there's all kinds of good opportunities for us to grow and do interesting things here.
Tom, is there a yes or no question left in the?
Really quick, what industries, in addition to the automotive industry, are you targeting for development in the state?
Well, as I mentioned it, I think you got business and professional services is going to grow 1.7 million jobs, the greatest out there. I think you look at the life sciences. If you go back, there are certain industries that are kind of small, but they offer opportunity for Louisville, life sciences, the aerospace, you name it. Then you see the ones that have great scale, business services, professional financial services. We've got to get more than our fair share in that space. But we're a manufacturing state, and the revolution in manufacturing is real, so we better win in that. I don't care if it's metals, because we got 30-something thousand people in metals that do the greatest things in metals around the world in this state. The automotive sector's got, I think, a locational quotient factor of 4.3. One's the average for other states. We've got real reasons we should be optimistic if we go out there and follow and win in the automotive, lead in it, win the manufacturing renaissance, and get more than our fair share opportunities in business services, and really, really be smart about investing in high-tech clusters and those kind of entrepreneurial and startup opportunities that exist. If you put that equation together, the data tells us we will be successful. And I'm going to go back and answer the other question. No, there isn't another city that I think is better. Some cities have peaks and valleys, and they all go through these transitions. With the bourbon renaissance that's happening, with Kentucky, I think, record-breaking last year in tourism, the authenticity that Pat mentioned, the people that are in this room, great cities require great people. Great companies require great people themselves. That interdependency between great companies, great people, and great communities all are integrated. And I know for a daggone fact, we got great companies and great people, and I really do believe Louisville's a great city, and we are a great state.
Very good.
So thank you both for being with us today.
Thanks, bud.
Mark your calendars. Our annual meeting will be held on Thursday, February 15th at the Waterfront Botanical Gardens. More information will be available online. Our featured speaker is legendary Dr. Duncanstein, also known as Mr. Darrell Griffith. We'll also be honoring our 2024 Florida Lee Award recipients, Alice and Wade Houston. So we're really excited to honor them for their contributions to our community. For more information or to reserve a seat, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Thanks for coming out, and everyone have a great day.